let's establish context, because it can be really challenging and tempting, right, to see a shiny object, to see a neat conference presentation, or to get a new device and want to somehow incorporate that into what you do. And that's a lot of fun, and there's always a place for sandbox, but we want to take a contextual look at mobile learning. Here's where I learned some of my context. I spent 3 days with the Woz, co-founder of Apple, when I was working at Abilene Christian University directing their mobile learning research. He taught me a lot, and one of my contexts is to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Let me tell you the theoretical approach I take. I look at the community of inquiry. I look at the social, cognitive, and teaching presence. But let me tell you how I've tweaked their model. I look at the device as the center of what I'm doing. And it's the way I'm going to communicate my contact when I'm contacting and interacting with teacher to student, student to student, student to content, or student to other. The device is the hub. Now, maybe I'm focusing on a particular hub at a time, but I want to take a balanced approach. So if I look at teacher to student here, I'm looking at my LMS. If I look at student content, this one example may be, well, perhaps I'm using a textbook publisher and integrating that into my LMS or learning experience. I'm connecting students through a discussion forum or perhaps potentially through social media and connecting student to other. What is the spiritual dimensions of the student who is in my course, or is there another content or context area that I'm connecting the student to? So the device is kind of in mobile learning at the center axis, and then we want to look at how that implicates the teacher to student relationship, the content relationship, student to each other, and then student to other. Well, one of the things I'm going to ask you in this workshop is what challenges you face when you connect your online students. Well, we know the obvious ones in online learning is they feel disconnected. Well, with the way that students are using mobility, when I say students, I'm talking 18 to 89. I'm talking the adult spectrum, that students use their device to connect and to do the business of their life. It's not a learning tool. It's how they access Netflix. It's how we Cash App. It's how we check the mail, check the weather. So what are some ways to connect and use our mobile devices to connect the teacher to the student? Well, one of the ways is to engage your students in an online class before it starts. Here are some ways to do that. You're going to have your learning management system, so you can connect by Twitter, you can connect through a Popular Me page, a poll. And before we go too much further, I want you to open this link up on your smartphone so you can follow along. It's a Popular Me page, and this is just one way I use ahead of time to connect my students to what I'm doing. A Popular Me page is a website that you can build, and I like it because it's responsive and it looks the same on any device that you use, and there's nothing you have to do in the back end to accomplish that. But you can put a digital syllabus, you can put a video, you can put a lot of resources in your student's hand ahead of the course to kind of create some excitement, create a connection, and have them start to anticipate your course or training relationship. Now, I've asked you to come to this, and I'd like you to follow along now. So you're probably watching this on a desktop or laptop. Now you've got a device in your hand that you can look at the resources as we go through the presentation, and I'll come back to that. What I like to do in a Popular Me page is, and you'll see the example here when you're coming to my syllabus for EDUC 5380. You can click on that Animoto video and play it. You may want to hit pause on this. Okay, now we're back. What I like to use is I like to give the students a little bit of visual, especially if they're a solely online student. I like to give them a little bit of the visual about campus. If I'm not going to see them at all, I'll show them some context about me. I'll show them a dog, I'll show them a house, I'll show them my office, things like that. I'll show them my record collection. And because I want to connect to them, I want them to see that there's a context to our online class. Here's another thing that I do to connect myself with the student is ahead of time I'll ask a poll. question on Twitter. What's the biggest opportunity obstacle? See, I've already asked you this question. If we're fully online, I can ask you another way. I can put this out on Twitter, and I can engage a Twitter community, create a Google form. I do this a lot of times if I'm going to be speaking at a conference. I'll post this on Twitter ahead of the conference with the conference feed. By the time I get to my workshop, I may have 50 or 100 responses there. So I've already got community started. I also put a hashtag for every course that I teach. Here is one that I taught for a university on the West Coast. For a friend of mine, I developed a course, taught this, and ahead of time, Gigi asked me this question, just wondering why the lit review in a web class called Creating on the Web as my educational technology course I developed for this particular university. So it started out a little contentious, first posting to the website. And I put, Gigi, great question. I can answer that, as you might suspect. Why do you think it's there? To torture us? Smile, and off we go. Fun exchange. But also, I had a student there who was kind of like a little miffed ahead of time, wondering, well, why are we doing this? Well, I was able to turn that and turn her into my corner, into an ally. So now, students who then come to the hashtag ahead of class or after it's already started can see that I'm not going to bite back. I'm not going to be a stuffy faculty member who's not approachable, but I might not answer every question that you have either. And it can set a good tone for the class. For our class, you may want to follow at OLC Mobile. I'll be posting things on Twitter, and you may want to check that out because there'll be additional resources and conversations that you can participate in. So you always want to address the why and plan for the what. Why, and then the what. Application, what, LMS, email, video, announcement, other. Those are some of the whats that you can do. Now that you've decided that you want to connect with your student, how are you going to do it? What applications you're going to use, and how are you going to do it? What's going to be your approach? So let's look at how to connect student to content. Here's a challenge. If you just put subject matter in Google, you'll get 50 million hits in less than a second. So how do you know what's good? Well, here's a reality. Like I've got you doing right now in this presentation, most of the students are going to sit and interact with you are going to have a second screen. They're going to be attending to a lecture. They're going to be sitting in a restaurant. They're going to be waiting in a line. They're going to be waiting at a stoplight. But there's typically now the reality of having a second screen handy. So it's an opportunity, as well as sometimes it's a challenge, right? 150 times a day, students are going to check their phone. I'm not talking just undergrads. So they're going to spend 3 hours a day on their device. And you're going to see this probably anywhere you go. I call it the texting dead. People shuffling along didn't even know you walked by them because they're attending to their device. Well, that may be overstating the case, and that's probably the outlier, but sometimes it just seems like that's normal interaction, right? You ever drive down the street and get a little scared when you look over and the person in the lane next to you is looking on their phone as well as driving? Well, some of the Animoto videos that you're going to come to, and I'm going to give you kind of the corresponding screenshot here. You may want to go ahead and click World Literature, then click the video here with a buddy of mine, Dan. Okay, what'd you think? That is Animoto. It's an application. I call them drag and drop applications because, let's face it, we're busy people, and the easier the application, the more likely that we're going to create the product. Now, the video intro to the art class, that was done in front of a green screen with a camera and just recording that video. It takes a little bit more work than Animoto, but you'll have to determine if that's something or a direction that you want to move in. So one of the ways to connect with your students is to create some kind of an introductory video. Now, you don't have to stop there. I can, or you can use that for an assignment, and there are a lot of different ways that you can integrate something like Animoto into your context. Now, here is SoundCloud, or you can use Audio Boom, or you can use the audio recording on any smartphone. But I like to connect to my students, and I like to connect students to my content by varying my approach. And I often introduce a unit or an assignment with an audio context and application. Or I'll have students read an article and then provide me a audio feedback on that. Now, a lot of times what I like to use with audio, since everybody has a smartphone and typically every smartphone you have has audio feedback, is I like to have them, if they're going to be out in the community or they're perhaps reading an article or doing something, but where there's an emotive response, I like to have them record it soon after, as opposed to having an experience and then waiting, 2 hours or 2 days before they go ahead and get back. So that's another way, is you can use it for emotion, to capture their emotion, or you can use it to introduce a new course, a new context, new material, or even instructions for a set or a module. Here's an interesting article, and I think I've included this at the bottom of the Popular Me page, and it's Are You Listening Please, if you want to explore audio feedback a little bit more. Here's another way to connect content. What you're seeing here is a heat map. One of my research fellows did this in a microeconomics class. The heat map here on the left was done with a laptop. The heat map here on the right was done with an iPad. Same class, 2 different sections: control group laptop, experimental group the iPad. This course was totally run on a laptop. This course totally run on an iPad. And we were looking at student engagement. And the students on the left engaged their course much less than the students with an iPad. It was pretty heavy and hot right here on class time. And then, as you can see, right here before class, and then students who, you can kind of see that their usage was contextualized to a class time or a perfunctory time, or over here is much more ambient part of their experience on an iPad. So when you're talking about mobile learning and you're talking about device usage, where do you think a student might interact with the content more from a device standpoint? Well, if you're university, or if you have a particular class and students have access to a mobile device such as a tablet, you may want to consider steering some of your design to encourage the use of a tablet. Here are some slides about how people spend their time on mobile devices. And you can see between a browser and an app. And as you can see, people spend a lot of time on apps. How do they spend? Adults spend their time with digital media. Some say upwards of 5 hours. And you can see the digital content that they consume on there is mobile and desktop or laptop. So they're spending a lot of time digitally connected to the internet, and the bulk of that is going to be on a mobile device. I also like to use applications such as Shadow Puppet to rethink a student assignment. Take a moment now in the Popular Me page and click on this. Okay, what do you think? Well, if you put on your grading hat, I enjoy grading this assignment a whole lot more than I do sifting through my speed grader app or printing out papers and grading them. It engages me with the student in another way. Another way that I like to have the student interact with the content is through an application called Canva. I post in my online modules, I'll post a Canva or a banner for my first week. Then I'll have students sign up to create a banner for subsequent modules or weeks. And then each week I post the winner, if you will. Well, it's a fun competition. I usually shoot the winner a $5 electronic Starbucks gift card. Always post it in the discussion forum who won and why. But it also, I have my students reading ahead in an online course. So I feel like they are better learners. And I'm not forcing them to learn. I'm making learning a part of what they do, and they're using the tools in a fun way. I've had a lot of positive feedback from students in all different facets of what I teach and how. So how do I connect students to each other? Well, social media can be a little bit of an explosive topic. How do we as academic institutions handle social media? Well, I always create a class hashtag, and students always have a discussion forum, and I also have and give them an option of working together. So let's look at a few ways that I think mobility can help you in connecting students to each other. First, what you're looking at here is a little doll, and it's a little Barbie doll, and it's one of my former mobile learning fellows does a thing called Meet Linda, the social worker on the shelf. There he is, Stephen Baldridge of ACU. This is an idea he came up with. I'd like to think that I equipped him and gave him the environment to come up with this. Just kidding, all due credit to Stephen. So he would take pictures of this little Barbie doll in all these different situations and use it as teaching. He put his on Instagram and Facebook. They say it's Self-Care Saturday. Today we found Linda by the pool contemplating her self-care plan. That's right, you need to plan for self-care, on and on. Well, Stephen teaches social work at ACU. He's a colleague of my wife who teaches at ACU. And this is just one way that he created connections with the content and with students with each other, but took them on a thing he called the 12 days of social work. And he just did this over the Christmas holiday. Another way I connect students to each other is have them use a ZMAP, or there's a lot of different applications like this. But if I have a particular class or workshop, I'll have them all post in a ZMAP where they're from, so people can kind of get just one more view or context. Here in the Popular Me page, you can go ahead and click on this and see one way that I use an application, Shadow Puppet, to have students provide a more visual and interactive posting to the discussion forum, as opposed to, hi, who are you? I'm this, I work here, and here's something. But this is one way you can use an application to do an introduction. A little bit about social media. Fastest growing group of Twitter users is A, B, C, D, or E. And the answer is 55 to 64 years old. What? Why is that? Well, because they're all getting chased off of Facebook, and we're all getting chased off Facebook because our children and the younger folks are leaving there because they're tired of getting stalked by us older folk, so they're going to Twitter. So we're all going over to Twitter to check out what they're doing. Twitter, back to Gigi. I got this from her several years after that class. Hey, Dr. Ham, wanted to let you know, since I graduated, this is what I did. I wanted to thank you for being a great instructor in my MA program and getting where I am today. Interesting. I'm sure Gigi and I still would have connected, but I do think that we initially connected on Twitter and have stayed connected, and I think that's pretty cool. Here's another way I like to connect student to student and student to content. There's a class I taught this summer, a hybrid class. We met face-to-face, and then we met online, and then we met face-to-face. I like to use Flipgrid. It's kind of that Brady Bunch experience here, right, where it's real important for people to create a connection, to see that we're not just a name and a profile picture or avatar, that we're real people. Flipgrid allows you to introduce yourself, but it also lets you pick that conversation up. You can respond to each. I like to use it for office hours and to maintain a conversation throughout the course. This is another way to use Twitter that my wife has done, I have done, and some other colleagues have done, that you watch a movie ahead of time, and then you pick a time, and the class can agree on, hey, between this time on a certain time, we're going to watch this movie together, and then we're going to do a live tweet. My wife has done that with the Breakfast Club. I've done that with the Breakfast Club. Other teachers have used different movies. It is a pretty fun experience. I've had live tweet discussions, and I'll be having one in my fall class. I didn't know how they would go. Students absolutely love it. Matter of fact, I had to bring one of my GAs and then a research assistant in to handle Twitter for me because they were just blowing it up. And here's another cool way to connect student to student, but also student to other. And that is, look at the textbooks that you're using and thought leaders in your particular discipline and get a hold of them on Twitter. This here, Eric Scheninger, he is people call him the Twitter principal. We were using his book, and I'm not sure how he found us, but he found out that we were using his book, Digital Leadership. I think somebody in the class may have tweeted it out, and he saw it. And he said, hey, that's cool. Let me know if you ever want a video conference. So we set up a video conference with him, and students were absolutely thrilled that the author of the textbook that they were using, or one of the books in their classes, was willing to meet with them on a Google Hangout. Now I would use Zoom. This was several years ago. But again, that's another way to connect. Also, you can just do a back channel when you're doing Twitter, and you can have a Twitter back channel in your very own class. I like to think that Maslow's hierarchy is kind of changing, because I think I have Wi-Fi or internet withdrawal if I don't have my ability to stay connected. But another way I like to stay connected to my students is through texting. I always set up a texting app, Remind, or I use it through the LMS. But I don't let students text me at all hours of the day. But I tell them, hey, here's my office hours, here's when I'm available, here's when I'm going to be in a course looking at material, and here's when I'm going to be available to hang out by text if you want to get me. And I've done some research along those lines. I'll share that with you in just a bit. Another way to connect students to each other is through case studies and setting up, I like to set up groups in Google Docs. You can kind of see my 80s roots here showing in the names of the groups. But I will kind of say, okay, here's your group, here's some tips on how to work together. Here's 5 of 6 of you all in a group. So boom, figure it out. You've got Twitter, you've got each other's email, you've got Zoom and a lot of other things. So let me know how that goes. It's interesting now how quickly they figure out a way to meet online and have a good old time doing that. But it also connects them, and the people that are in their group end up being people that follow each other on Twitter or get connected on LinkedIn and things like that. Yes, teacher text can profoundly impact student success. That's an article I was in. Here's some cool things, though. I started doing this back before they had the Remind apps many moons ago in a community college I was adjuncting in, and this kind of shocked me because this was a community college, and it was a psych class, and the students at this community college they couldn't get into local schools here. They would do their first 2 years there because they couldn't afford the four-year experience here. So that being the case, I still expected something from them, but I didn't expect this much. I had a student say, hey, Dr. Ham, I missed the home fun assignment. Okay, homework, I'm corny. I call it home fun. But I saw a video that was interesting and inspiring. I thought maybe you'd like it. Here it is. And stuff like that. I'm thinking, these are, used to be a junior college. These students aren't supposed to be this into it. So I had this 16-week experience, and I did a thing then called teacher text, where I had a control and experimental group, and I did them side by side, and I did quizzes, papers, and 5 or different learning artifacts, and the ones in green were the ones that used teacher text. The ones in blue did not, and the teacher text students outperformed the control group, except for the final, because they started to complain that they felt like it wasn't fair, because the texting students were making arrangements to bring food before class, and they would all huddle together and stuff like that. So, I learned a few things with that as well. But I found that texting was a great way to to create community, whether they were face-to-face or online. Now here's student to other. This is kind of some hey, just some miscellaneous, but I'll throw it out there. The neat thing, just a quick tip with Animoto. Animoto, you can create reusable resources. You can have them synthesize things, use it for instruction sets, have them put information in a new form, and pull your experience into usable forms. Another thing I like to use is Powtoon, create a cartoon, kind of a corny joke, so I won't spend too much time on it. The question is, this stuff just cool, or does it really cause learning? And I think a lot of the research that I have done with, I think I've directed 36 mobile learning research projects, funded research projects. And I'd say it really does matter, and it's not just cool, it does cause learning. But you want to understand your context, and you want to understand your outcome. Here's one context. Social work class, and the registrar put this particular class in the ad building in a particular number of class just because that's where it put classes, social work classes that were that size. But was that the best place to learn about social injustice in Abilene, Texas. So what we did is we had the students go out and take their phone and take a picture of social injustice, load it in the LMS, and then the class would vote on which one it wanted to address when the class met. This was a face-to-face class. So, hey, take off class, go do your homework. They came back and there's 25 pictures and rationales and cases, and they voted for this one. It was the public library. And the I don't know if you can't really see, but this little white area here beyond it was where the handicap parking was. And old, Billy Bob here and Bufus could just pull right up here in their F-150s and amble, right in the front door. But there was a little alleyway here. If you were handicapped, you had to park over here. Well, students decided to address that issue, and it got addressed from a city perspective pretty quickly. And these were just some data points from a traditional group, again, and a remote group that we used, and then looked at the before and after data on that. I like this quote, mobile computing strengthens the link between online and offline life. I agree wholeheartedly. Here are examples of some 6-word memoirs, but that you can use for how to, perhaps in a texting or in a Twitter context, to have people summarize a particular content or context. And what I like to do, if this was a live webinar, I would say, what has impacted or challenged your thinking in this? So I'm going to do it this way. What has impacted or challenged your thinking in this presentation, up until now or after? And then post that 6-word memoir. This is not required, to @OLC Mobile. Let's just have some fun with that. Another way to look at your, went too far here. Another way to look at your mobile context is to do a student usage survey. I did this in 2014 at our university, and just did it in the spring of 2017. But it allows me to collect ongoing data. Who are my respondents? What are they using? If they have a tablet, what do they use? Here's an interesting fact about our university. When I came here in 2014 to Harlan-Simmons, a mile up the road from Abilene Christian University, hey, sometimes you want to give yourself a raise, you move, right? So we were servicing Microsoft tablets. Let's see, how many people have a Microsoft tablet? It didn't even show up on the survey. But if it had a tablet, the biggest majority was iPad. So we went from a help desk that only served Microsoft products to now it's full service. People were driving Fords, but we only fixed the Chevys. So I could have, flapped and got mad at that all day long. But I did a presentation a month after I got there, and I did the presentation in October. By Christmas, we had a help desk that was serving Apple products. So sometimes you just have to let the data tell the story. We asked the students, how often are you using a smartphone for learning? Several times a day, tablet, mobile apps. So if half of our students are using their phone for learning, do we want to ban phone usage from our class, or learn how to better use mobile devices to augment the learning process? And using devices for school-related work, they felt it would increase their communication, motivation, knowledge, and improve the quality of that. And out of the students that were using, they all, were favorable towards using mobility, and that's just their perception. And lastly, I don't know if you know what this symbolizes, but this is the beginning video to the first video on MTV in 1981, August. Forget the date, I want to say the 7th or 8th of August. Video killed the radio star by a group called the Buggles. It was an interesting time, because now music television is anything but music videos, but it was in 1981 a distinctive change in how music was consumed, because now it was visual. So now every song had a video, and it wasn't just the quality of the music or the catch or the hook, but it was also the visual came into it. I'd say in 2008, 2009, when the iPod and the iPhone came onto the scene, was kind of the Buggles moment, if you will, in higher education. Higher education became much more visual. Higher education became much more portable and it became much more interactive. So I think at some point, maybe 30 years from now, people look back at the iPhone and say, oh my goodness, are people still using those? But you can mark a distinct period in time that impacted higher education. So the context of what you're doing with mobile learning is very important. And one of the things that you'll be doing in this workshop is figuring out your context and then looking at what is the what and then attempting to fill in some of the why. And you'll have an opportunity to create some artifacts and get some guidance along the way by myself. Thanks, and I look forward to seeing you